Ah. Hello there, everyone. So, bit of a different video today. As I sit here in this temporary shelter that I've found/contributed to out in the woods, I wanted to talk a little bit about the gear hikes that we've been doing at Rocket City HEMA and what we've learned and what I hope we can continue to experiment with as the months get a little bit colder and people are more willing to come out. So firstly, what is a gear hike? Well, I was inspired to start them by Mr. Christian Cameron. He's a big reenactor / living history expert and one of my favorite authors who I was just watching on his Facebook of how he'd pick a time period with him and his buddies and they'd go out and just using that equipment they would basically trek around for a week or a couple days or something like that, and I loved the idea. In fact, he walked from a pretty significant distance around Italy with just historical gear, stopping in towns, mind you, but which was really, really cool. But I was inspired by this to see, well, what kind of things can we learn? Because as a historical European martial artist, you mostly think about the fighting, but the context of where you fight and how you get to the fight, etc. I mean, 99% of warfare is sitting around waiting for orders or living in places that are not necessarily all that great to live in. So, started off the gear hikes here in the Montesano Nature Reserve as just something interesting to do, to see how it goes. So the first one I ever did, it was just me. All I had was a cuirass, a helmet, and that was the only armor I had at the time, and I had 5 people not in armor come with me to make sure that if I passed out or something, they could, 1, carry me, 2, carry my gear, which is more important than carrying me, and 3, that I wouldn't end up dying in the woods and being some random encounter that an adventuring party stumbles around on. But, anywho. So, I think this upcoming one, which will be happening this Sunday, will be, I want to say our 10th? Maybe not quite to 10. But it's certainly getting on there in number of hikes we've done. But the main things that we've learned from doing it is that, number one, it's tough. The area around here is quite mountainous, well, hilly, with rock outcroppings pretty standard. The trails go up and down quite a lot. There's not a lot of flat ground, which is good. It's certainly a challenge. Probably the first thing that I really noticed was that wearing cuisses, it started to get really, really tough. I wanted to just ditch those cuisses more than anything. Eventually I got tougher and I don't mind it as much anymore, but initially I'm like, oh man. Especially as you're walking uphill, your leg gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Wearing gauntlets on the march, not something I think a lot of my guys enjoy doing, not something I certainly enjoy doing, because it makes your hands heavier, and there's not a lot of places to rest your hands. So we usually hike. We take some pole arms with us as both walking sticks and just because. And people will lean on them, but that stick is the gauntlet kind of counteracts the nicety of having the walking stick. So I wouldn't be surprised if you just took off your gauntlets and tossed them in your bag or something along those lines. Something that more I've noticed, because I'm the only one that does it, is historical shoes change things significantly. So these shoes are from Arm Street, and they're awesome. They have a sole that is harder and a little more modern. So not quite purely historical, but I don't really care. But as I'm walking on this rocky terrain, it's almost like a mix between a foot massage and torture. So after I'm done, I really feel like my foot has been, someone's been taking their thumb or a rock and been pushing against certain parts of my foot, and I've had to push back as I walk. And so it's certainly been helping me learn how to use my feet and keeping my balance as well, because on damper days like today, just getting part of this structure set up, so putting the leaves and stuff there, I nearly slipped on the rocks several times. Part of that may be on the klutz, but other parts could be just the fact that you got to be a little more careful. On mud or something like that, it's very easy to skid. You don't take quite as many risks as you do with modern shoes. Other things have been, probably the biggest thing we've learned, 2 things, would be, number one, picking your rest spots. So the way the hikes work is that we walk for a certain distance, stop, then we find a place that is comfortable, and usually not too far away from the trail. We'll stop for a couple minutes, drink water. When we first started, I'd share a story, and things of that nature. What we've noticed is that the stops that we do choose have very specific attributes. Biggest one being waist-high rocks. If you can find a waist-high rock, you're stopping right there, because there's nothing better than being able to sit / lean against that rock. When there's not enough seats, a lot of my guys will wedge themselves in between trees or just lean against a tree flatly, though that requires a little bit more effort. I personally have wedged myself between two trees before as my best option to rest, because I can't take off my breastplate or anything by myself, so that's more often what I did. It's tough. The armor really does start to weigh down on you in regards to, like, do I have to have this on right now? So I would not be surprised if long distance nobody on foot would want to be wearing their armor, or they'd be wearing much lighter stuff. Hiking in just a helmet and mail, not that bad. The full cuirass and things, well, cuirass and gauntlets and all those 9 yards, no. Goodness, no. The second thing that we've noticed that's super important is the importance of camp followers. So not everybody who comes on the hikes is looking to wear armor, which is good, actually. The rule that I put out to people who want to take part in the hikes is that if you're wearing armor, you carry one provision of armor, and you have to clean everything you wear when we're done. And you have to bring it back. Story in a minute about that. The second bit is that if you are not wearing armor, you carry double provision of water. So one for you, and then one for basically just be split up amongst other people. And that system's been working out really, really well, though as the hikes got hotter, we were carrying more and more water. And a couple hikes ago, I think it was 2 hikes ago, we had a smaller number of people come with us, and that meant that we had to carry our own water as we were hiking in armor, and that was miserable. Because little things that you don't think about, like, being able to take care of yourself, essentially. I mean, anyone who's squired at a deed or seen the squiring that goes on at a deed will know that people in more complete armor are basically toddlers, and they need assistance doing a lot of things. And so not having someone around to help with that was pretty rough. So camp followers are super, super important, and we'll talk more about them in a second. But now it's time for a funny story, because why not? So it was our first big hike. So I'd done the one by myself, and then I got, I think it was about 6 of us in armor, plus a couple people out of armor to assist us. And we had decent split up. So a couple people were wearing a gambeson and a mail shirt. Some people were wearing breastplates. I only had a couple at the time. And then I was in most of my gear. And all of us, no, we didn't even have the kettle helmets yet. I was the only one in a helmet. And my buddy Stan came with us. And Stan was in full armor, sans gauntlet and helmet. Smart one. Now, I should point out, by the way, since Stan's armor fits him really well, and Stan is also a mutant, I'm not surprised that he could walk for a great distance like that, because if he's used to that chest and legs, etc., and it fits him so well, that doesn't really impact him. And the helmet sucks. The helmet does suck a lot, because that just jigs onto your neck, etc. But anyway, so we're hiking along, and it's a pretty warm day. And we hadn't been going that far, but one of our guys starts having clear signs of heat stroke. That's awkward. And so we had to, in the middle of the woods, bend him over a rock to get this mail off of him, because the mail was just slip over his head, and it fit him decently well, which was a problem, because now the gambeson had sweat through, and it was caught on a bunch of things. So we're in the middle of the woods. We got poor guy bent over a rock. 4 of us are trying to pull this stuff off of him, and we're just praying that no one comes around the corner and wonders what the heck is up. But we finally get the mail off of him, and then comes the problem of, well, we can't leave this stuff behind. We have to carry it all back out. And this is another reason that those camp followers would have been super useful, because if one of them has, a basket or something on their back, like you see in some depictions, or if we had a wagon, just chuck it in there, no big deal. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, a little random tangent that that hopefully when I send this video to you, Charles, you'll enjoy. I would not be surprised if on hikes, treks, if they had guards on foot, if they rotated out and switched pieces of armor as they went. So if they were going into a more rocky place, if they might all take off their legs or something along those lines, just kind of literally switching out on the move, because you can certainly take the gear off and relatively put the gear on as you move. So I would not be surprised if that was a thing, and that might bear some experimentation. But anyway, if we'd had a camp follower with us, more camp followers anyway, if they'd had a basket on their back or something along those lines, we could have just chucked the mail shirt in there. He could have just carried his gambeson. It would have been fine, but we didn't. So what we had to do instead is the guy carried his own gambeson. He just tied it around his middle and walked around like everybody in the Pacific Northwest with their flannel shirts. And then the mail, just carrying it dead weight is just so obnoxious. So what we ended up doing is one of our guys volunteered to put it on, which was kind of interesting. It was like a sort of changing of the guard thing, and props on him. Though it got caught in his long hair more than a few times, so I threatened to cut it off. But anyway, things like that and situations like that have arisen on a couple of the different hikes where, someone hits their limit and you've got to assist them by carrying their gear or things like that. We've had helmets be put on spears, so they're just hanging off the back like a hobo's satchel. We've done that a couple times. Unfortunately, the chin strap broke on one of them recently. Yeah, and just little things that you don't really think about. And it really does, as time went on, I was like, okay, how much of this do I really want to wear? Because when you're kind of organizing this stuff, you kind of need to wear a little bit more than everyone else to prove, hey, yeah, you can do it. But at the same time, I'm not going to deny that sucks. But some days it's rougher than others. When wintertime rolls around, life will be way easier. So let's talk about things that I'm looking to do with the gear hikes, and that I'm going to use the medium of my dying YouTube channel to show. Number one is I want to try out hiking with a tent. So what that's going to mean is we're going to take my canvas tent. Now this tent is not actually of period. It's about 1820s, 1840s. So later period, but it's a big tent. I took it to Oktoberfest, and it was awesome. But we're going to try hiking with the canvas tent, because that, the weight-wise and the construction-wise, is relatively close. So we're going to hike with a canvas tent, which will mean that we'll need more camp followers carrying pieces of this tent with them. And I want to have a guard of people going with them as well. And the idea being that we'll march somewhere out here to a spot, set up the tent with a rotating watch. So I want people to be on guard duty as we do this. We'll set up the tent and we'll rest for a solid, 2-ish hours. And during that time, I'm hoping that we will, because I've been broaching this idea with my guys, we'll play historical games, we'll discuss things. I had the request of, hey, couldn't you do some lectures about stuff? We could pick topics and discuss them. Sitting around and reading the Descharnay questions would be really fun. Things like that. Maybe even have a picnic. But we'll do all that. Then we will pack it all up and walk back. And so that'll be fun. And while that's going on, there have to be some people on guard duty. Another thing I want to do, which we'll probably do first, and which is why I'm really glad that I found this shelter today, is I was recently looking through my book, Landsknechts on Campaign, and one of the depictions of a siege, there are tents set around, and sticking out of hay bales next to a lot of the tents are polearms. And my first thought when I saw that was, oh, great idea for stowing your polearms if you don't have racks or anything like that. Great idea. But upon closer inspection, thanks to the blown up images, I noticed that there are people in these little, basically lean-tos, and their polearms are part of the construction. And so I was like, man, that's really cool. And that's way easier than carrying around a tent. So doing a hike where we do have to carry a tent, and then doing a hike where we now have to just set up our own temporary little structures will be a ton of fun. Because that also encourages people to look into carrying their own historical tools and things like that. So in my case today, I've got a small knife and then a small hatchet with me today, both of which would work in period. I've got my cloak and all that. But those are the kinds of things that I'm looking to do with the gear hikes, and hopefully I can use this channel and that people are interested in seeing the experimentation. It's not perfect, and not everyone's in full historical gear, etc. And the temperatures of North Alabama are a little bit warmer probably than the medieval cold period, but it's what it is. I hope that people find it interesting, and I hope that we can learn some stuff from it. I'd love to hear if anyone has any suggestions for stuff we could try. And beyond that, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video, where we'll talk about more sweating in the woods. Cheers, folks.